Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Integration Unplugged, a review of the State of Customer Data Integration 2013 report. I'd like to introduce our speakers today, Lou Guercia, President and CEO of Scribe Software, and Betsy Bilhorn, Vice President of Product Management at Scribe Software. We'd like to review a few housekeeping items, so at this time I'd like to hand it over to Betsy.
So this is a little bit different kind of a webinar that we've done in the past. If you've attended Scribe webinars, we are going to do a fireside chat. So this is a really kind of an open, collaborative conversation. So Lou and I will be talking about the major findings that we had in our State of Data Integration. One of the things that we really want to encourage you is to ask questions via chat. So, and we'll be weaving those in and answering those questions as the conversation progresses. So please don't be shy. If you have a question about whatever we're talking about or want to interject a comment, absolutely go ahead and do that. We'll also, if we have time at the end, depending on how robust the conversation is, we'll also take questions at the end, or we can respond to you after the webinar as well if we happen to do that. You know, the next slide. So quick introduction about Scribe. For those of you on the phone who perhaps are not our customer or partner of Scribe, have never heard of us, we're a data integration company. We have over 15 years experience in the data integration space, particularly around customer data and CRM. We have 12,000 customers worldwide, and we work also with about 1,000 global partners who use and implement Scribe every day for their customer data. So let's just jump into our SDI report. So we started with this back in 2012 was our inaugural report, and really what we wanted to do, we have kind of a different and unique focus on integration where we really are really concerned about customer data and what were people doing with that customer data, what were the applications that they were using and needed to integrate. We had, as being an integration company, our own strong views and a 15-year history working with customer data, but we wanted to hear from folks on the front lines who are dealing with this every day, so our customers and our partners, what their thoughts about it and where they were going with customer data. And I think obviously as an integration vendor, I mean, this is very valuable to us as far as determining a strategy and roadmap and helping you better able to do what you need to do every day. But we also wanted to share those learnings with our customer base, with our partner base, and with others like you to, kind of see where there was some commonality and where we can all work together and go forward and make integration better and really leverage that customer data and, have better positive outcomes for our business across the board. So now we're in our second year in 2013, and we'll talk a little bit about the demographics of that. So last year when we did the report being inaugural, we had about 300 respondents. This year we had over 900, which is, a 3x increase, which is pretty interesting. And another thing that is really great is we've had 50 countries represented, and literally from every continent, maybe not Antarctica, but every continent. And it really points to me that this is a very global issue when we talk about integration. This isn't a North America issue or a Europe issue. Literally countries around the world, companies around the world are concerned with this. And we had a good split of 80% of what we call technical and business executives who, again, are trying to affect integration in their businesses, and 20% of system integrators and other partners who are actually implementing integration for those customers. So I think, when I think about this, Lou, this is a 200% growth just in a little over a year. And I mean, obviously there's some factors there of, it was our inaugural study and whatnot. But I think also, it's just when you think about integration in the news and people are really talking about it, and we all know how difficult, we all get requests for surveys all the time, right? And unless you really care about it, you don't really want to spend that 15 or 20 minutes. So, I mean, what do you think just generally kind of, we're seeing these big numbers, what kind of factors do you think contributed to that?
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for the introduction, Betsy. And, hello, everyone. I'm delighted to spend a little bit of time with you this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. And before I, respond to that question, because I'm pretty excited about sort of the uptake that we've had in the survey this year, I did want to just take a moment to thank some of our partners who really helped us make this survey very successful. And in no order, but just as I see on Marketo, On24, Trillium, Power Objects, LedgeView, and Slalom Consulting. Those are a really great mix of ISVs and some of our very important sort of implementation partners. So, one of the things that I think is just fantastic about the study is that we were able to get such a reach. I'm not aware of any analyst firm or any other independent firm having a study specifically on customer data that has reached almost 1,000 respondents in this broad, a geographic coverage. And I might also add the mix between, as you pointed out, Betsy, the technical and the sort of the business side. One other factor, which isn't really borne out in the study, but I did want to let everyone attending know, is that it's pretty nicely distributed between small, medium, and large enterprise, because the ways that those different segments of businesses handle customer data integration is different. So in total, I think we got a really, really good cross-section of responses. So that part's really humbling and flattering, and I do think that there's a lot to be said for the partner effect. Now, more specifically, I think the importance of integration in people's minds as sort of a macro trend in IT, I think is really starting to bubble up and become kind of a top area of thought. Now, what we'll talk about during the hour is to what extent is that thought turning into action and turning into strategic plans, right?
Right.
Now, one of the things that, I think contributed to this focus on integration is that since the economic crisis, and so good that we're kind of getting out of this, what we've seen is that CEOs and their exec teams now are much more focused on growth. Right? Everyone kind of got tired of playing defense, if you will, from like 2008 for those next couple of years. And interestingly, during this time, they realized the need to be a lot smarter about how they're going to do business. Okay, so now that the market's getting healthier, the economy's getting healthier, they're not just returning to the same sort of game plan. They're thinking, how do I leverage data? How do I kind of put more and different strategies into play to help growth happen again while still staying focused on other things? So, what we're seeing is, I think, kind of an outpouring and interest in the topic, right? And then, if you couple that with some other wonderful things that have happened in technology, the growth of social, the growth of mobile, and sort of the growth of marketing automation during this period, there's still a lot of innovation happening, even though we were in a period of tough economics, right? But, when you kind of put all this together, I think businesses realize they can do more using technologies. Knitting together these technologies is probably something they need to focus more on. And they're probably not going to go back to the old ways of just hiring more sales and more service and marketing folks. Are trying to do it smarter. So I think the confluence of these factors has been and will continue to be great for really proactive management teams, and it will help define kind of the next level of competitive advantage. Right?
So one of the interesting things that you talk about is social, and I think we see a lot of articles. People talk a lot about they're pretty hackney phrases, consumerization of IT and whatnot. But I mean, if you think about as an individual consumer, you and I just outside of Workday and the way that we use online applications, right, where they're seamlessly integrated, and also my buying experiences, right? So if I want to go buy something, I'm doing a lot of research, and when I'm wanting to engage with that vendor, I'm expecting a fairly personal experience, right? And that's just, I don't really think about that too much, right? I expect that to happen. So, as far as, businesses now engaging, do you think that there's an influence there as far as I am an IT buyer, I'm a buyer of technology, and that sales cycle is actually changing, and it's really incumbent on businesses to, in some ways, treat me as I would be a consumer, right?
Yeah.
For consumer product.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think while this kind of conversation I think lends itself to these more nuanced sort of discussion items, because for all of you who have taken the opportunity to download the study, there's a lot of really detailed survey results in there, and we sort of specifically chose this kind of format rather than to as talking heads just sort of present the study verbatim.
Right.
But I think when I start thinking about your question and sort of the emergence of social and mobile and how that's affecting buyer behavior, and also how the businesses want to affect and react to that buyer behavior, it's an interesting thing, right? So as I mentioned, during the last few years, it's been tremendously great time for innovation, right? And I think from a social technologies, other marketing-oriented technologies that maybe have been more consumer-oriented are allowing businesses, on the one hand, to be much more specific in terms of how they measure their marketing activity or their social activity, right? Things can be digitally measured, less reliance on gut, right, in terms of how to do that. At the same time, buyers, and I think I'm just saying parenthetically, buyers are choosing to meet with the company on their own terms, much farther down the sales cycle, right? So they can gather all kinds of information. They can get sentiment on products, services, and how companies deal with their customers. And so I think there is a lot at play here, and I think more what I think is very interesting is as a CEO of a small technology company, I think CEOs of all size companies are really asking, in many ways, demanding better payback and more inspection on how the marketing and social technologies are being used in business, and whether whether this is just marketing or sales or support. These are really the parts of the business that really deal with customers and prospects. So there's just a lot happening there. How integration fits into that, boy, it's really the early innings of what's going to be a long and exciting ball game. But we are seeing how these technologies are playing out for customer data.
Right, and how I think integration just in general now has jumped up as being very critical as we're trying to bring all those things together, right? Because there isn't one Uber application or data stream about a customer or to affect that kind of getting that downstream payback of those activities. So let's go into talking about some of the 4 focus areas of the study. So there were quite a lot of questions, and as Lou alluded to, there's a lot of really rich data in the report. There's 22 pages of it for you to really just dig in there and draw your own conclusions. We focused on 4 areas. First would be general IT trends, right? So what are CIOs and other technology acquisition influencers are really thinking about when they're thinking about priority and where they're going to spend their money. The next one, we went a step down and said, okay, well, now what do we talk about business systems integration overall, right? So that it may not be customer focused, but if I'm running a business, what am I thinking about, right? And what is integration for me? And then we go down into CRM integration, right? Because customer relationship management kind of being the hub of all things customer, what people are thinking around that. And then lastly, how, the hows and the nuts and the bolts of integration trends. So we're going to start talking about the general IT trends and flowing downward. So one of the major findings that we have is that we've kind of picked out here is we've talked about that close to 50% of the budget ownership now is outside of IT, which I think, again, if you've been reading trade magazines and looking in the news, this isn't a surprise. But I think it does speak to, it can make integration kind of interesting, and I think also the office of the CIO's role in the organization a bit more interesting for them. So Lou, when we've talked to our customers and partners, and I mean, also running a business, and you have a technology executive reporting to you. What are your thoughts around that? What is that changing role of the CIO, and where does integration kind of maybe, where that opportunity with integration for the CIO and defining their role within the business?
Sure. Well, definitely the role of the CIO is changing, and I think it's a really healthy change, right? So let me just sort of offer sort of an anecdotal point here. A few years ago, I joined Scribe, and prior to joining Scribe, I was an executive at IBM, and I had a really wonderful opportunity to present IBM's global CEO study. I think that is sort of the blue ribbon of all sort of CEO studies on kind of corporate imperatives set by the CEO. And so I had an opportunity to present that to execs in both North America and South America. And one of the consistent pieces of feedback that I received is that the CEOs are really asking their CIOs to recognize that they need to respond better to the lines of business, right? Now, at the same time, CIOs have to deal with a lot of issues around data governance, security, mobility, all of the infrastructural things that are part of this innovation revolution that we were talking about with marketing, social, mobile, and so forth. But what we've had happening here is the CIOs now are recognizing that over the last several years, the growth of cloud technologies, right, SaaS applications in particular, has really driven the productivity of those lines of business. And so the CIO, now is turning towards the line of business. I think, when I was referring to kind of that economic downturn that we came out of, I think that my sense was, having traveled around and presented a lot on behalf of IBM, a lot of the CIOs were sort of turning the other way, saying, hey, I don't have the capital, I don't have the resources to really help you. If you can help yourself with some kind of cloud or SaaS application, go for it. But now, how do I make it all work, right? And so we're still kind of in this period where the CIOs still have to do more with less. There's sort of an ethos, I guess, if you will, about this. But, whether it's a new collaboration system, CRM, marketing, social, what have you, I think the CIOs now are really aligned with the CEO's imperatives for the business. And, while on the one hand you can say, are they being somehow are they losing their power, if you will, because a lot of that budget's going to the line of business? I think there's a really strategic way for them to engage the line of business and actually recraft what that CIO office really does, and make it more as a kind of connecting tissue for all those systems, and tying those systems to the objectives of the business.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, we call it Chief Information Officer, right? And I think kind of the challenge and the opportunity is that, with the line of businesses are, making these technology acquisitions, or, making do with what they can get absent of IT, you kind of have this fragmentation of applications and this fragmentation of information, right? And I can't expect, my CMO to know how to put all of that, information in intelligible manner. So I think in some ways, I mean, at least in my mind, you have, even though there's this huge fragmentation in silo of data, you have this great opportunity as a CIO to really be that person who puts that all together and makes sense of it and really aids the business, right, and bringing that all together, right, and really bring that intelligence to the business across.
And I think so. I think you're absolutely right, Betsy, and I think the way that it works is pretty similar if you're a large, medium, or a smaller business, right? That those levels of engagement with customers and prospects, I mean, I don't think differently if I'm on the internet researching something for myself, whether or not I'm dealing with a small, a medium, or a large-sized company. I just want things to behave in a certain manner, right? And that's part of the really cool thing about all of this innovation that's happened, is that small businesses can perform at a similar level to large, you know, in some cases they have a cleaner landscape to build their platforms on, and so, you know, they're actually able to have a very great experience for a lot of their customers and prospects. Now, one thing that, you know, I do think that's a little bit closer to the infrastructure of what CIOs really need to get involved with, and I think this came out in our study, is that as you go up from small, medium to large enterprises, you start to see more and more of these hybrid environments, right? And so, you know, that's not a very easy landscape to deal with, right? And so, you know, I think if you start thinking about all these lines of business that have gone out and sort of solved their problem, right, with some kind of a cloud application, there's still some very significant operational systems like ERP systems and others that's sitting behind the firewall, and the CIO and that IT organization has a tremendous responsibility to democratize all of those applications and get them to all work together. So, you know, this has been kind of a really interesting time for the CIO. I think even though they may be losing some budget, I think they can get themselves more aligned with the CEO and not just be operationally running systems, but thinking how the business does its thing.
Right, and where do I make the biggest impact, right? Because, you know, if you think about it, so, you know, I still have these systems and the data is still valuable, and I can leverage that data, right? It's not about the delivery method anymore or where it's actually living, but it's how I put that together.
Right.
So, you know, as a CEO, I know you're concerned about customer service, right? And, you know, how do we put that information together so that when somebody is, say, calling Scribe, that, you know, our service rep really kind of has that holistic view of the customer across Scribe, how they're engaging with Scribe, to help them give better service for the customer and maybe even do some extra tasks, you know, being the single point of contact, right? So maybe my invoice is a little late, hey, they can take that payment or whatever. So in that way, I mean, where the CIO, you're still focusing on the infrastructure and putting these things together, I think you're also elevating, you know, being that strategic partner, and bringing that information together and really leveraging that information. We talk about doing less with more, right? So I have this hybrid system. It's not about ripping and replacing, and it's not about online as the ultimate solution to everything. It's, you know, how do I get this data from the places that I have it, all the nooks and crannies today, and the CIO can put that together, right?
Yeah.
And really make that very effective for the business.
And you know, when any executives are well aligned with their CEOs, and if the strategies of the CEOs are well aligned with the market, then good things happen for everybody, right?
Right,
So
it's all goodness.
It's all good. So
Yeah. So now let's turn to talking about that business systems integration, right? And we touched on a little bit about hybrid and online and those kinds of things. One of the things that was interesting in major findings in this area was over 70% of our respondents absolutely said that systems integration was extremely important to their business. You know, everybody wants to do this. This is critical things, very strategic. And then when we get into the statistic of, well, do you believe that you've gotten there? You know, do you believe that you have full integration? That statistic was 16%, right? Which is kind of, you know, that's a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum. And the other thing that was very interesting in this area is that when we did this study last year, that 16% grew from 15%. So that was a whopping 1% increase. So where do we, you know, I mean, obviously we're in the integration business, you know, I mean, in our experience or in your experience, you know, what do you see the gap, you know, where we say this is really, really important, we really need to do this, but actually making it happen? You know, what are, you know, how can we close that gap?
Yeah, so let me try to, I mean, it's a mystifying issue in a way, right? So let me kind of come at it both from one little tactical point and then maybe something a little bit more strategic. So for those on the webinar who know Scribe, you know, we are largely a partner-driven organization. You know, we do the vast majority of our work through implementation partners, right? Some local value-added resellers to literally the largest global systems integrators in the world. So, you know, our point of view especially since a lot of our work around customer data integration has been in CRM environments, right? So, you know, one very tactical thing that I have observed in my time at Scribe is that when our implementation partners are engaged for a project, they tend to think very much around a very defined scope, right? So there is something that gave rise to the business going out and deciding it wanted to move to a new CRM environment or implement a new system. So there's been I would call, very traditional approach to doing these types of projects, right? So a scope is defined, there's a statement of work, there's some software and some hardware that's purchased, and then there's a project team that comes together and solves the problem.
Right, and there's a go-live date.
And then, you know, what's interesting to me, and, you know, for any of our partners that are, you know, joining today, is I really am trying to evangelize a new way of looking at things, which is, you know, don't just do that project and do a great job on it and then go turn your attention and focus on another new business opportunity. But we really, I think, the reason why you don't have high levels of complete integration is that the projects are defined in a very limited way, and then sort of those trusted advisors aren't staying involved with the business to go and knock off projects 2, 3, and 4 that are going to get the business to more full integration. Now, more strategically, I think that there's an opportunity as a result of the growth of all of these cloud technologies that are bringing so much value so quickly to virtually every line of business of a company. And, you know, Scribe and others are trying our best to knock down the difficulty of getting those, you know, those organizational capabilities integrated. It's really, you know, a function of really having a vision for what full integration means, right? I mean, you know, how different businesses define it, I think are just whatever is important to that business, right? And so I think you have to have a kind of a longer term view of what you're trying to get towards as a business based on what is possible, based on what can be done over, say, a few years' time. And I think that will help move the dial. Now, one thing that's very encouraging is that in the study, I don't know that we have it on any of the charts, but those businesses that engage implementation partners do say that they're considerably more integrated than those that do it yourself, right? So that does speak to the fact that there's goodness there by using a partner. But I think sometimes that ecosystem of the line of business, the IT, the implementation partner, they're too focused on a project and not, I think, there's a new opportunity for them to focus on more of a real destination and sort of chunking out the journey that will get to that place.
Well, and then I think, you know, also too, we talk about partners, but I think there's an analogy with customers who are, you know, maybe not engaging with a partner, right? You know, especially in larger enterprises, you know, we have, and even I would say in some, you know, in medium and small business, you know, we have very savvy, you know, technical people who can make that happen, right? But I think, you know, kind of the analogy, you know, you and I were discussing earlier was about running a marathon, right? So there is a little bit of this, I think, you know, being able to have a plan over the next 2 to 3 years and really focusing what's important, but also taking bite-sized chunks, and it's the steps along the journey, right? So when we say things like, well, we really want to know what click-to-cash is, I mean, that, you know, for anybody on the phone, we talk about doing click-to-cash as having this one dashboard. That's a really nice thing to get to, but, you know, it can be very difficult when you try to put all the parts and pieces. So doing this one overarching project versus, well, you know, can I at least see, you know, from my lead to cash, or, you know, how do I get some campaign ROI, or, you know, get those things in smaller chunks. And then the other thing you touched on around is ISV. And to me, this is an interesting place because we talk about cloud, we talk about consumer experience, where a lot of this is seamlessly, you know, integrated is what I would say. And I mean, what about ISVs as far as, you know, is it just about selling your product and getting the deal and leaving it to somebody else to manage? Or, I mean, don't you think that maybe also having integration as a product capability, right? Having that kind of embedded or behind the scenes. I mean, wouldn't that make people's lives easier and get to that definition of full integration, right, where it would just be out of the box?
Yeah, so I think so to the point that you raised about a marathon, deciding to go out and run a marathon, I think that's a good example. I mean, there's many terrific analogies. It's hard to, basically, it's how do you know you're going to get to your destination if you haven't mapped out the route to get there, right? And so one of the things that, we're trying to do with this study is we're trying to fan the conversation around customer data. The level of full integration is sort of, you say, wow, that's not really where we want it to be. It hasn't moved considerably from last year. I think the point is that many of our partners and customers are moving towards increased integration.
Yeah, that's
so,
probably a better way to put it.
Maybe you set off to do the 13-mile run before you do the 26-mile run, and that's still terrific progress, right? So it is really kind of a journey. Now, with respect to the ISVs, I had a really fascinating conversation with one of the industry bloggers, and we had a discussion around are suites, if you will, inevitable. And what I mean by suites are technology suites, right? I'm going to get this beautifully well-orchestrated portfolio of and I'm talking about customer data, financial, CRM, marketing, analytics, service, support, all from one vendor, harmoniously integrated, runs magically. And the fact of the matter is, very few companies that we have seen ever implement that. And what's sort of interesting to note is that most of the big technology companies that can afford to put together a suite oftentimes do it inorganically, which means they've done acquisitions, which also means that those technologies are not intrinsically integrated, right?
Right.
So there is, I think, a real calling for the ISVs to say, okay, I'm doing a really great job for this marketing organization. I know my marketing automation app has kicked butt, but now, I want to be more of a partner to that organization. I want to see how I can share that information into other parts of the business that would leverage that. And, you see that starkly with financial data that comes out of the ERP system. Everyone says, well, I'd love to have that in the CRM environment, but heck, wouldn't it be great for the customer service agent to know whether or not someone's entitled to the service based on whether or not they've had some other kind of a product sell or whatever the case may be, that data should be able to go to wherever it's going to create the most business value. And many of the ISVs have, as we pointed out, these cloud ISVs, SaaS ISVs have really grown tremendously, but they should be asking themselves, how could I increase my connectedness to be more relevant to the business? And then how can the CIO, the line of business, the implementation partner, and the ISV work towards building that roadmap that'll get them towards more connectedness? The good news in all of this is that conversations typically precede the hard work. And we're having lots and lots and lots of conversations on that topic, which means that a lot of the action is going to follow.
Yeah, and I would say that, in some ways when we look at these statistics and we say, wow, well, 70 versus 16, but I think on the other hand, as you walk through this, it's so fragmented, right? And there's just so many choices and there's so much work to do that in some ways that isn't surprising, right? Because, who is the onus on to provide integration, right? Obviously ISVs can help out there, right? As a product capability, we've seen with our customer base that, using a systems integrator definitely increases that satisfaction level and that level of full integration. But I think like you said, it's like, what is the definition and the journey? I think there's always going to be a journey, right? I think there's no nirvana of full integration.
Yeah, that's right.
And we'll see progress in that 16%. Maybe it'll be 18% next year, but we're never going to see 100%.
So the rate, maybe the key metric in the rubric really shouldn't be percentage of full integration, but increased.
Exactly.
Yeah, connectedness
or satisfaction. Yeah, absolutely. So now we're going to dive a little bit more into CRM integration. And one of the things, there were a couple of things in this area that were interesting that I kind of want to cover. The first thing that I want to talk about is, we've had a lot of conversation about customer data, leveraging it, being holistic across the business. And we asked a question about, when you're integrating CRM to something else, what are those top priorities? And in rank order, we had BI as the very top, customer support systems being second, marketing being third, and ERP being the fourth. So, I think I think that's interesting because, typically we hear about the bread and butter CRM, ERP, and even some lower level stuff like, I just need to bring in some CSV files for this, that, and the other. So what do you think about, as far as BI and CRM? We talk about customer data and leveraging all that customer, and then kind of the rank sort order that our respondents have said.
Yeah, so I think with respect to the percentages, they're fairly tightly clustered together. I mean, looking at the survey, just as you may be doing here on the webinar, I mean, we had BI and CRM at like 74% and ERP at like 69%.
So it's a very tight
band.
It's all
band,
very
right?
related.
So what it's really saying is that I kind of look at that. I'm not a statistician, but that seems, as we would say in Boston, kind of wicked close, right?
Yeah.
So I think what it really points to is that CRM users want connectivity and they want insight from ERP systems, customer service systems, marketing automation. And what they really want, I think when they say BI, is they want to have all of that information available for discovery and for business insight, right?
Yeah.
So I think when they're saying, geez, 3 out of 4 say BI, business intelligence, I think those other 3 are kind of components of that.
So BI is really the outcome of that.
It's really the outcome of that. And, there's been so much exciting work done around, and there's several definitions of this, what is big data and so forth. And I'm not about to espouse what my view is or whatever, but, it's about discovering insights and patterns in large data sets, typically unstructured from my point of view, but, some of that could be obviously structured data. What we're talking about with the state of customer data integration, I think, is what's the right data, right? And how do you get the right data, which may be not vast amounts of it, but what's the right data that can, and we often here at Scribe, and Betsy, you do this as the head of product, is we think in terms of personas of people, right?
Yeah.
So we think we'll apply different names, Mary the marketer, or Sam in the support area.
Yeah.
And we try to think about, well, what is it that Sam and Mary need to do, and what data would they want out of the sales CRM environment? And we try to think about how do we express that into our roadmaps and so forth. So this is not necessarily about huge amounts of data and big BI environments, but I think what people are really saying and expressing in the survey is that they want that relevant data from those environments to be discoverable and to get some business insight so that they can map back into how they're going to engage prospects, customers, their partners, and tune their IT and their infrastructure to better support growth and satisfaction of their customers, right?
Right. So really what we're talking about is effective data.
Effective data,
And I think it goes back to that marathon analogy because, I mean, when you look at, how close the spread is, right, I think maybe 5 percentage points. When I look at that, I'm like, wow, that's a lot to bite off and chew, right? So ERP, marketing, and support, let's get all that, and then BI, right? And that's just when you think about that in total, it's over much, right? You know.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's really a lot. And I would like to leave everyone with this thought, and it's a question. What will prevail in the end? Will it be these suites, or will it be best of breed? And I think there's going to be growth in both sides of that, but not a lot of mid to smaller business, and even some of the smaller enterprises, are going to go all in with suites. It's still, I think, largely a best-of-breed world, and I think that there's a way, we think here at Scribe, that there's a way that you can get those best-of-breed technologies to play as nicely. And I think for the ISVs, the message is, what's wonderful about ISV apps, cloud apps, is they can turn on instantly.
Right.
Well, they can also turn off instantly too, right?
Yeah.
And so I think making those SaaS applications more relevant will endear you more with your partners and your customers. So why not take a stab at that?
Yeah, and then when we go down into, like really tactically speaking, right, when we talk about effective data, and, so when we talk about the state of CRM integration and CRM in general, when people put in CRM systems and they think about integration around CRM, they really want to have consistency, quality, and share kind of that accurate information, right? And when back to what you were talking about, when we have a major technology acquisition, we have a statement of work, we have KPIs, we have milestones and checklists and review boards, and it doesn't seem from the report, and I would say just anecdotally in my experience, that a lot of people really do that or elevate to that level with their integration project, right? And so, I think given that we're talking about integration is so important and what it can do for the business, and now it's a CEO or a CIO level imperative. I mean, what can people do to say, yes, I'm happy with my integration, or I'm really getting what I need, or how do I measure that? I mean, what kind of tips and tricks do you have, or what are we trying to do maybe as an integration vendor to kind of help that along, or and kind of make that more of a critical, I think, technology acquisition, or put that up at the level of CRM? I mean, you have any thoughts there?
What we're talking about here is sort of a different side of the same coin, right? When you say, well, we're not more than 20% at full integration, and we say, well, we see the business and the partner very oftentimes scoping a project rather than an overall roadmap.
Right.
I think, that a consequence of that very often is that they're not thinking as strategically about what is really possible, and so there is no formal process for evaluating the integration other than
that project,
right?
Yeah.
So, I think it's really a matter of that collective group, and I really believe this, is the executive team, right? Those line of business leaders, the IT organization that's going to be responsible largely for working with those partners, whether those are implementation or ISV partners, to bring it all together into an overall roadmap or game plan, and then to set some sort of process by which we're going to get there and how we're going to evaluate, how we're doing. And that's really what this whole study and this whole outreach is about, is trying to, do our little part to reach that opportunity. And so, I think it's like a lot of change with things to do in our market, which is just such a great market because things can change. Like, change doesn't happen in a linear way. When we start seeing more companies thinking more strategically about integration, those companies will be thinking about customer experience. How do I want a prospect to interact with our company across which touch points? We're not in a situation now where there are huge technical barriers for that to happen. I mean, one of the many benefits of cloud technologies is that they're more open. There's more API technology. There's ways to connect and interchange data. You know, we're not in these sort of, we may have somewhat siloed environments, but the silos can now be easily connected, whereas in the past silos were made of pretty heavy-duty concrete, and they weren't as easily connected. So I think having that plan, knowing how to sort of measure against that plan, and getting the ecosystem of people together to get after it. I mean, once that thing starts to shift and there's more success stories, I think the market will change more quickly than it has over the last few years. I mean, what we're going to do as a result of this study is we're pretty excited about some of the interest we've had with analysts and the media. I mean, we're getting pretty good interest in it besides our customers and our partners.
Right.
Is that we're going to now, as a follow-on to this, we're doing a guidebook, and it's not going to be, you know, just what Scribe thinks. It's going to be another data-driven, best practices-oriented guidebook on how IT, business, the partners, whether they're ISVs or implementation partners, can actually do this kind of thing and actually create these roadmaps towards increased integration, and how they could actually measure their progress, how they could chunk it up and make it. And we're going to let the market speak, and we want to follow on, right? That's us playing our role, right?
And I think that's I think that's a great thing to do in general, because, I mean, as you're talking, and I'm sitting here and, you know, having had run an IT organization in the past, I'm like, well, that's great, and where do I start, right? You know, and so I think this would be a nice jump start to give some people some ideas about how to do that, or you know, how to create those, in even the tactical kind of KPIs, right? You know, how do I measure, well, what does accuracy really mean, right? You know, when you're talking about vis-a-vis the integration I put in place or didn't have before, and those types of things. So that is really, really awesome. We're coming to 10 minutes to the hour, and we have one last kind of major finding category that we went through, and that is what we would call the integration trends. And so an interesting finding here that we pulled out, we talked about that do-it-yourself integration is still widespread, not unexpectedly, but also on the decline. And you know, I think what do you think is driving that decline generally? I mean, is it kind of maybe the ease of use, the proliferation of third-party tools, APIs? I mean, can you give me some thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's like a lot of kind of rich environments that are complex. There's, you know, no one or two things that are driving it. Probably a few things. I think to some extent, you know, there are a lot of partners, implementation partners, and IT organizations that have done the custom code, do-it-yourself kind of thing, and it's sort of a Pyrrhic victory. If I know the term right, it's like you can win that particular battle, but you haven't set yourself up to win the war, right?
You've actually lost the war.
You've lost the war, right? So, you know, you may have achieved what you want to do by connecting those two systems, but you have nowhere to go beyond that, right? So those environments, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, they tend to be brittle, and they're not very open for those downstream projects that you may want to do, right? So, that's one piece of it. I think, you know, we're in a environment where, you know, so much SaaS and cloud innovation has happened. You know, I've been in SaaS for exactly 11 years. I launched my first service in 2002, and if I think back, you know, I've been continuously in this industry for that period of time. If I think about the level of connectedness due to some not true standardization, but some generally accepted API standards for exchanging information, there is sort of this API economy. So when you start sitting down and talking to business and say, well, we can get that marketing automation data directly into the CRM environment, as we can also get some of the ERP data into your customers. People believe it right now, right? So they understand that, I get that. You know, there's not this sort of blank stare of, are you trying to sell me snake oil here, right? So that there is sort of this belief that it can happen. Now, also, you know, some leaders in this market, like Salesforce, have done a phenomenal job building an app exchange, right? So whether you're a user of that or any other, you probably know that there are lots and lots of ISVs that connect into that environment. Now, that may or may not be the right thing. I mean, maybe putting too much power into the CRM environment and not enough connectedness to those applications that are connected into that CRM environment. So really what we're trying to be is a little more egalitarian in terms of where that data can flow. I mean, we don't believe that everything should just go to the CRM environment, right? You may want marketing, social, service, and CRM data to be in a data store where it could be used for business intelligence rather than have every single one of those data from those applications going into the CRM environment. So I think, there's a lot there, but I think there's it's a combination of factors. I mean, the growth of cloud, the sort of sense that, hey, I've done it this way, but may not be the right way to do it if I want to have a more strategic view towards my customer data. And I think, there's just a lot of opportunity now to do better.
Well, and I think, having APIs, more APIs is definitely enabling that. But I think also, just to challenge you a little bit, I think there's a little misnomer too, because when people say, well, can I integrate, I'm coming to you and I'm buying an app, and can I integrate that into my CRM system or ERP? And you go, yeah, we have an API. But I still have to write code. I still have to stitch those together, right? So I think that is a kind of an interesting thing where we talk about the definition of integration and say, well, yes, we integrate to everything because we have an API, but the work is still incumbent on the partner or the customer to actually stitch those APIs together and actually effectively.
Yeah, and stitch it together to the what are the customer experiences and what are the strategies and what is it that the business wants to do. There's been a lot of investment, both capital and operating expense, to build out better environments. And, the state of customer data integration is strong. It's getting stronger every year. It's a really rich environment. What we're here to do, obviously you and I, Betsy, is to think about what it is the businesses want to do to better engage their customers, their prospects, their partners, to drive revenue, to drive more satisfied experiences from their customers, to grow their businesses. And we have a phenomenal opportunity because what we can offer to this ecosystem is technology that, for a small fraction of what they've paid to create all these capabilities in these lines of business, we can leverage it and unlock that potential. And the whole reason that we did this study is to give greater voice to that.
Absolutely.
So thanks for you and your team and the marketing team here for getting that done. So
we have about 5 minutes left, and so if we just want to go to the last slide as well. We do have, I think, some questions rolling through, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, this is a 22-page report. It's very dense with a lot of information. So, we've drawn our own conclusions here, but I very much encourage you to get the report and look at it yourself. You may have some other interesting conclusions of your own. And you can get that on scribesoft.com, SDI 2013. We also, obviously, we're an integration vendor, so once you look at the report and you decide that, hey, I want to go deeper with this integration thing, want to learn more about Scribe and our particular integration offerings, you definitely check us out on scribesoft.com/online. So I'm going to open it right now to any questions that we have out there.
I see one question about the how-to of integrating. Whoever asked that question, just get a hold of Betsy or me. We would love to have that discussion. We didn't think that it would be appropriate in the context of trying to present the information from the study. So we didn't want to have it be really kind of a presentation on what Scribe's capabilities are per se,
and also
more on the themes.
Yeah, more about the themes, and to get you thinking about different ways that you can think about integration, how it's evolved. How-tos are, and that's also about your individual project, right? So, this was not the intent of the webinar. We've got lots of great content, as there's lots of other resources on the internet to get you started on those first steps. So, let's see, any other questions at all?
Okay.
All right. Well, I think that will do it then. We're at 11:57. So again, on behalf of Lou and I, really thank you for your participation. If you have any questions at all, or you want to have a one-on-one conversation, please feel free. You can contact me directly. It's Bilhorn, BBILHORN @scribesoft.com. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you and have a great rest of the day.